Ladies and gentlemen.
Okay, so welcome back. This episode is our monthly awareness episode. This episode might be a little more deep than the others will be.
A little more triggering too, I would say.
Yeah, so viewer discretion is advised. For the month of August, specifically on August 31st, it is Overdose Awareness Day. So on this episode, we do have a guest that is going to be speaking. Possibly two guests. But the first guest that is definitely going to be with us today, I'm going to let her introduce herself when we hop on the call with her. But I know that this specific topic has really impacted her life. This episode, I feel like we're doing this, I think, just to spread awareness. Yes, it is a very sad topic, but at the end of the day, all you can do is spread awareness about those things.
Mm-hmm. And with our speaker, she does go around and she does speak about her experience.
Yep. I have actually seen her speak live. I think it was 2 summers ago. In the county we live in, they have a big ceremony for overdose awareness, and they also have like a big mural that's there all year round. And I saw her speak there live 2 summers ago, and I think her message and the way she speaks and holds herself about it speaks volumes.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Just a little bit about overdose. I mean, I have personally gone through it in my life. I have lost a very close cousin to overdose about, I think this January coming up will be 3 years ago. So, I mean, it is a very hard thing to deal with and a very hard thing to understand. But, I mean, all we can do, sitting behind a camera talking to you guys or behind a audio tape trying to say to you guys, is we're just trying to spread awareness to make people more known of it.
Yeah, and I feel like what our guest is going to speak about is something that's been going on for about 2 years now, that has been this powerful drug that shouldn't be used in other drugs, and it's killing people. And I know that a lot of people, you could try something for the first time and it could be laced with anything and you could die of an overdose. So you don't need to be an addict to die from an overdose. And I feel like that's what a lot of people don't understand when it comes to drugs, especially if you never had somebody close to you who was into drugs, I guess. You don't need to be an addict to die from an overdose.
And I feel like that's a big
stigma.
We keep bringing up stigmas in every episode, but that's just the world we live in.
Yeah.
For example, let's say Mr. Joe was a great kid, A's in school, graduated college with honors, got this great job out of college, and he was out one night with his friends and decided to try something. Let's say it was the second time he's ever tried something, and it was laced with who knows what nowadays, and he overdosed. But then everybody comes around and goes, oh, well, you must just not have known that he was an addict.
I mean, Mac Miller is another one. I know he did drugs for a while.
Yeah.
Everybody knows he did drugs, but I wouldn't say he was a terrible addict. He got laced with fentanyl and he died, and it's a sad thing because he was a wonderful person, and I feel like a lot of people just don't understand that. You don't have to be an addict to overdose. You can overdose from something so silly and you don't even realize that you're overdosing. It doesn't even have to be drugs.
Okay, so here's some facts about overdose. Over 96,700 people die from drug overdoses in a year. Opioids are a factor in 7 out of every 10 overdose deaths.
I was going to say, I feel like a lot of people who overdose over pills than they do of actual injecting themselves or anything like that.
Yeah.
I feel like in this day and age, it's so much easier to obtain pills than to obtain the actual drug itself, like heroin or meth, if you're injecting that or anything like that. So,
and going off of that, and that's another thing with people who do shoot up, they think, oh, my tolerance is high, I can add a little bit more. And like that's the biggest thing is like like these addicts believe that their tolerance is so
So
much higher than what it is when it's really not. And then one more fact, um, drug overdoses have killed almost 1 million people since 1999. So that's as long as we've been alive. That's like,
it's terrifying.
that's really scary. But yeah, we don't want to talk too much about this because we're going to let our speaker do majority of the talking because we really want her to share her story because her story is just so deep.
Hold on, wait. 96,779 drug overdose deaths were reported from March 2020 to March 2021. That's a
That's
year.
A lot.
That's insane.
But yeah, so I think we're gonna let our guest have the floor.
Okay, so as we were talking earlier in our episode that we were talking about a little bit ago, we have a lovely guest with us today, and we just want you guys to be able to hear her story because we believe she has a lot of beneficial things to be heard. So go ahead, Tanya, the floor is yours.
First of all, thank you both for having me. I appreciate the opportunity. My name is Tanya Niederman. I am mom to three children, JJ, Grace, and Carter. Um, on February 12th, 2021, um, JJ died of fentanyl poisoning. I'll start a little bit. Growing up, he was a funny kid. He was always the smallest. He played hockey, street hockey, and ice hockey. He loved fishing. He was big brother to his two sisters, Grace and Carter. And one thing that I just always admired about him was he was authentically himself. There's opinions of him didn't matter. He wore the clothes he wanted to wear. He, listened to the music that he wanted to listen to. He, did all the things that made him happy. And, I think it's hard when you're a teenager, especially in this day and age, to be confident in yourself and the things that you do. So, like I said, on February 12th, 2021, you know, our world was destroyed.
Absolutely.
I was out to dinner that evening. JJ's father had called me and said that something had happened to him. And my initial thought was, there was a car accident. He was 19 years old. He was newly licensed. I mean, 2 years having your license, you're still, in my opinion, a new driver.
Absolutely.
And I'm not really sure why that was my first thought, but JJ wasn't a troublemaker. He didn't really get in trouble, other than not cleaning up after himself, or the typical things that teenagers do. Um, and at the time, he lived with his father and his grandparents. So when I got that phone call, I didn't really understand what his dad was saying to me. Basically said JJ's gone. And I remember saying, like, where did he go? Like, it didn't even click.
No.
And I raced there as quickly as I could. And when I turned the corner, it was like, this is something really bad has happened. There were police officers and an ambulance and a fire truck, and there's parts of that evening that I still can't fully remember because I think it's shock, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely. In
Um,
a setting like that, like when you see all that, like fear and emotions just goes out the window because you have no clue what's going on.
right. And I had conversations with him about things that you should do and shouldn't do, and we were always kind of like, make good choices. I was always, I mean, you can ask my kids, I've always said that to them, like, make good choices. And, he always did. I mean, obviously, I'm sure there's things that he did, and we've done it as I did it as a kid. Like, my parents didn't know, and I thought they're never going to find out. But when I walked in the house that night, I had really no idea what was happening. Trying to ask questions, and you're reeling with, like, I'm so sorry your son is gone, and trying to figure out, like, how did that happen. And that night, I mean, we sat there, we had no idea, we didn't know at the time, because there was really there was nothing to prove or show. They had asked a lot of questions, like, did he do drugs, was he doing these things, and I kept saying, like, no, like, absolutely not, absolutely not. And it wasn't until the next day that they had said that they had found fentanyl in his urine, I guess.
Yeah.
And I, JJ's father and I, we kind of just like looked at each other, and I was stunned. That's the only thing I can say. If you had asked me the day before, I would have looked you dead in your eyes and said that JJ, I had no idea that he ever tried drugs before. Um, and I immediately, kind of went into like, oh my God, like, how do you, say this to people? How do you, like so many things go
Yeah.
through your brain,
Yeah.
not only for yourself and, JJ's dad, but also, my daughters.
Yep.
In that instant, we lost our son, they lost their brother, our family lost their cousin, their
Yeah.
nephew, and their grandson. So it was a lot all at one time.
Going off that, when you said when you found out, I was actually at the Philly diner, and it was me, my boyfriend, and our two really good friends, and we were sitting there eating, and one of our friends we were with, because we obviously knew of your son, because just like our high schools are like rivals basically, so like we knew of him, like I knew his friend group, and we were sitting there eating, and our friend got a text, and he was like, Justin Niederman died. And we were like, we all looked at each other, and we were like, what do you mean? Like, like, what do you mean he died? And like, even though like I knew of your son, like, and I've always heard great things about him, I didn't personally know him, but like I still remember that feeling, like, oh my God, this is in our town. Like that's literally like my backyard. Like, and it was
Right.
just, and even so I can only imagine what you went through, and me, just from being like even like a bystander to the whole situation, I was still like, oh my God, like this seems like surreal.
And to jump off of that, I mean, I've said this a million times in conversations that I've had, but even JJ's friends and the people that he knew, like they lost a part of their childhood. And I think that, there's so much trauma. I mean, I lost a part of my life that day. Grace and Carter lost a part of their life, and our family lost a part of theirs, and his friends did. And it's, I felt like one of my strengths is empathy. And I feel like I took all of that, because it was like, how do you try to make, like, I feel awful right now and I don't, but how do I try to help other people? Because I couldn't help JJ. It was, and I live with that guilt every day. Like, I couldn't save him. I couldn't protect him. Like, what did I miss? How did what did I not ask good questions? And I feel like you're always going to have that as a parent. Like, your one job is to, protect your kids. And I felt like I failed him. But on the other hand, it's like, growing up, you're supposed to be able to make mistakes and learn from them.
Yep.
And, JJ is an example of someone who made a mistake and died from it. And I think that, too many kids don't realize that that danger is out there. I don't think enough
100%.
parents realize it too. And to be honest, like, we didn't see it coming. I've said this over and over and over, but I had conversations about not drinking and driving. He had a really good friend group where if they were, and truth be told, one person didn't, and then they drove everybody around. So, that was always my biggest fear, is that, like, the drinking and driving. Never, ever did I ever imagine that we'd even have conversations about him being involved in drugs. And it's so far stretched now that, I just think kids are like, oh, I can try it. It's fine.
Yep.
Or that's, that happens to other people, not me. Or, that happened in another state or another county. It's not, it's literally happening in our backyards, and in
Yep.
some cases, our own homes.
Yeah.
And I don't think enough people know that it exists.
Yeah, exactly. Like, so before we hopped on the call with you, we like kind of recorded a little intro segment into this, and that's basically what we were talking about, is that like people like don't know what is happening. So us, as being two people that just got into this, and we're trying to like just express the way we feel, even if nobody's watching. Like, we just want to be able to say that, yes, we spoke about it, and we're trying to spread awareness about it, so that we can try to stop so many situations like JJ's story, so they aren't reoccurring.
Right. This whole thing, losing my son has been the single most change anything in my entire life. I've been through divorce. I've been through, the loss of a job. I've been through loss of, family members, grandparents and things like that. And the cycle parts of life that, are sort of expected to happen, or that, and this, I've learned that it's like it's out of order. And you, as fearful as you are, and for me it's a real fear now, because it happened. Like I lost my child, I lost my son. And even with my girls now, like, it's the fear's there. They walk out of the house and it's like, oh my god, like, there are just so many things, and it's awful to think that way. But when it happens, like, you're kind of like, oh no, like, this could happen again. And you do everything in your power to try to stop it. um I've spoken on news things, I've done news interviews and all the things. And, recently I've done speaking in middle schools and high schools, with
Awesome.
Camden County and part of Nope. And I can't tell you to me, how much more of an impact that makes when kids are sitting there looking at a picture of JJ and he looks just like one of your friends, or a kid you see walking in the hallway, or a kid that you play ball with, or he's an everyday kid just like
Yeah,
each and every one of them. And
absolutely.
I kind of pointed that, like, he sat in the very same seats that you're sitting in right now. He's walked these halls, and I spoke at Highland and I've spoken at Triton, and he knew people that went here. And it can happen. And if you're not careful, you just don't know what's out there.
Exactly.
And that's all I made a promise to JJ when he died, that, I would do everything in my power to share his story, to make sure that his name never died. And as long as I live, it won't. Um, but to just his legacy to continue, and to try to save lives in his honor. I mean, that's really all that I can do. Because it's here. Fentanyl is everywhere. It's in everything. It doesn't discriminate. It doesn't care what you drive, where you go to school, how much money you have, how much you don't. It will affect you no matter what. So that's really what the message is to try to save lives in his honor.
Absolutely. So, if fentanyl was a person, what would you say to them?
When you sent me this, I didn't really know. Anger, disgust. If there was a way that I could, get rid of it, I would. But it's ruining families. It's taking lives without warning. And honestly, that makes me angry. It makes me angry that kids are not getting a chance to live the lives that they deserve. JJ being one of them. All the amazing things that he was to do will never come to be. Like, I will never know the man that he was going to grow up to be. Um, we don't get to see him graduate from college, have a family, buy a house, do all the things that he was supposed to do because of it. So, um, it's anger. I am so angry at it,
Absolutely.
them. But the only thing that I can do now is to try to, avoid it from happening to someone in our circle of, friends, family, my community.
Yeah.
Try to stop it.
Absolutely. If someone was thinking about experimenting with a drug, what would you want to tell them?
I would ask them a question. Is the risk really worth your life? Is that one time that, someone says, hey, give this a try, or is it worth it? Because there is a very, very good chance that you're not going to wake up from it, that you're not going to come back from it, that your family is going to have to mourn your life and the loss. And, I talk about this, when I speak to the kids, but it's so hard to imagine. And we've lived through it, but we had to pick out a casket for JJ. We had to decide what his final outfit was going to be, down to his underwear. We had to pick a plot for him to be buried in. We had to watch his friends carry his casket out of the funeral home and to the cemetery. I can't accurately describe what that feels like in words. But know that your life matters. You matter to your parents, your mom and dad, your siblings, your aunts and uncles, your grandparents, your friends. And it's not worth it. It's not worth the risk. The only way that you are going to survive and live is to stay away from it at all costs, no matter what it is. If it's not prescribed to you by a doctor, or you don't get it from, a physician or a pharmacist,
Mhm.
it's not worth the risk. It's really not.
Absolutely.
Do you have any advice or words of wisdom on how to go through the grieving process?
The one thing I will say is that it doesn't end. I think a lot of times, and myself included before this happened, grief is not something that you can magically, it doesn't go away.
Yeah.
It's like a chronic thing. You can't work it away. You can't exercise it away. You can't eat it away. You can't sleep it away. Because when you're done, it's there facing you and staring at you. I have learned, just from my experience, to how to give people grace who have been through grief. There are times when people come from a good place, but the things that they say, the platitudes, sometimes it's hard. It's hard for you to kind of grasp. Um, and you have to sit with it. I have days where I wake up and it's there every single moment. I always say each day I wake up, and there's a split second that you forget, and then it just all comes flooding back.
Yeah.
Um, the fact that, like, I will never see him again, ever in this lifetime is a heavy weight to carry.
Yeah.
It does get different over time. You, I guess, learn to carry it. That's the one thing that people have said. But the one thing that I've taken comfort in is knowing that for me, I will see him again. Doesn't make it easier in this life, but you have to let it come when it comes. I'm very lucky to have people around me that let me cry when I need to cry, let me scream when I need to scream, allow me to talk about him when I need to. If I, need a day to just sit in silence, I get that. So I am very lucky, but you have to allow it to be, what it is, and just embrace it. You can't, like I said, you can't wish it away. It doesn't go away. It will be with you forever. And if you're lucky enough to have people that can support you, then, that's great. And if you don't, message me. I'm happy to listen. I've had plenty of people listen to me. I've had stories come from all over the country, just how sorry they are. And I've been through the same thing. And it just makes you realize that you're not alone.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's hard. It is very, very hard to try to live a normal, or what we call normal. I say I had a before JJ and after JJ.
Yeah, absolutely.
The things that mattered to me before JJ don't really matter now. And the things that are important now, not that they weren't then, but
Yeah.
your whole perspective changes. The things that are more meaningful, it's the moments and the memories and the time spent versus all the other, crap. Um, and I say this to my girls all the time, like, the experiences are what you're going to remember
Yep.
throughout your life, not the stuff that you've gotten. So, just, you have to sit with it. You really do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, we are so honored that you were able to come on with us today and share our story. We're going to do whatever we can to share this and get it,
Thank
because
you.
it is such an important message. But yeah, I mean, we can't really express how thankful we are. And
Well, thank you
yeah,
for doing it. I think it's very brave of you. I mean, I know you guys are young, and it's a hard topic to talk about, and especially when you lose friends. You there, you just have to keep talking about it. I think the more we talk about it, the more people are aware of it, and hopefully the more lives that are saved because of it. So thank you so much, and thank you
Yes,
for
thanks.
letting me share JJ's story.
Absolutely.
Course. And I feel like with us, like, now, like, starting a platform like this is the best, like, opportunity to like make people aware of everything. Like, we want our platform to be like informational and like make sure we're actually putting good things out into the world as well as it
And
being fun.
that's amazing. I think it's important. Grace is going to be 19 and Carter's 15, and it's a different animal, like teenage years now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's it's so important that kids are hearing this, and it's not
Yeah.
just kids. It's you know there's middle school kids, there's high school kids, college, all these new things that are happening. You're in new circumstances, new experiences, and you just have to. I say this to my daughters all the time, like, you're in charge of your body, you're in charge of what goes in it. And you have to treat it as if it's, a temple. And I know we've heard this before, like, eat well and try to exercise and all those things, but that comes to everything. And drugs included. Again, my girls have been given a tough lesson to learn. And unfortunately, I think that, they've, it's always in the back of their mind. And, even now we have more conversations about it, but it's out there, and you just have to be aware and talk about it. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so here we have our second guest with us, Haley Schellenger. She's actually my sister-in-law. Um, I know that overdose and addiction has impacted her from family members around her. So I think we're just gonna let her formally introduce herself, and then she's gonna tell us a little bit of her story. Go ahead, Haley.
All right. Hi. My name is Haley Schellenger, and as Harley said, I have been impacted by addiction with a lot of family members. I have a very interesting story with my family. In the course of 3 years, I lost four very important men to me through addiction. My biological father, my brother's father who raised me, and two of my uncles all passed away due to overdose. Um, it's been a very difficult situation for me to navigate, a very traumatic situation. So, it's something that weighs heavy on my heart, and I just wanted to be able to kind of share my story as somebody who is a lover of people who have passed through overdose.
Yeah, so growing up with those people, I know at a young age we're not very like aware of what adults are doing outside of our lives, like besides what we see them. Did you know that addiction was impacting them?
When I was a young child, I wasn't as aware. I had a lot of traumatic experiences as a child, as did my brother. I don't think at that point in our life we were aware of what was happening. But as I grew older and moved in with my biological father, I was very much aware of the addiction that was going around. Um, and, it changed the person that I loved. So my relationship with a lot of these men in my life has gone through a roller coaster of different emotions, through love and hatred and regret and guilt. So I think as I got older, I started to see, more. It was, I saw it more prominently.
And how did that like affect you when you started realizing those changes? Like being obviously, I think you were in like your teenage years when you lived with him, right? So like
Correct.
how did that affect you?
So I moved in with my father when I was in eighth grade, and I lived with him all throughout high school. At the time, I was like a very troubled teen. I grew up around addiction without kind of knowing it. So I had a lot of traumatic experiences before moving in with my biological father. And then once I moved in with him, it was, at first it was a saving grace. I felt like, I needed an escape, and I didn't have a familiar relationship with my biological father. So it was kind of a new beginning for me. And in the beginning, it was great. It was a lot of new adventures, new friends. I went to a whole new school. But as I progressed throughout high school, I started to see the changes of my father and how he would act. And I think that seeing it firsthand, seeing him sober and then seeing him high, destroyed our relationship. Unfortunately, it was really sad to see, because the person that I kind of grew to love was turning into what felt like a very evil person. And I was still young, even though I was in high school, it was still kind of a new experience for me. So I was kind of like wondering why my father, was not an active participant in my life, and why he was choosing drugs over me. And I started to develop, you know, a lot of hatred towards him. It really destroyed our relationship. I didn't talked to him for 3 years before he passed. And I hold a lot of regret for that and a lot of guilt. But I think as an adult, I have a different perspective now on addiction. And, it definitely has changed the way I view things.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so going off of that, like you said that you didn't see him 3 years like prior to that, and you said stuff about like you have regret because obviously you would never get to see him again in this life at least. Does that regret like lessen any? Does it heighten any, or is it just kind of like the same?
I lost my uncle first. He was the first of the four men to pass away. And my uncle, I have different experiences with the different addicts in my life. Because as I said, my dad, he was very, he wasn't like I saw him while he was an active addict. Like he was actively getting high and actively doing drugs. And on the flip side, my uncle, he really stepped up and played the dad role for me while I was growing up and kind of around addiction without realizing it. My uncle was a recovering addict, and he was clean for 7 or 8 years, I believe. And I only really remember him as somebody who was clean. And he was the kind of person that if you knew my uncle, he was the most incredible human being. He was inspirational. He found his faith. He was somebody who, once you met him, you always loved him. He had so many people who loved him. And then one day, he just wasn't here anymore. And then after the fact, my dad passed away, and I think that is why I had regrets because I believe it was 2 years later my dad passed away. And after my dad passed away, I kind of sat back and really thought about my relationship with my father compared to my relationship with my uncle. And I think it stems down to like these people are somebody's sons, they're somebody's dads, they're somebody's moms. And, although I was able to hug my uncle and tell him I love him the day before he passed, I wasn't able to do that with my dad. And although I was angry at him and I felt at that moment that I hated him because I was so confused and so angry, I think as an adult and as I began to lose my loved ones, I realized that you know, the guilt comes from not telling my dad that I love him and not um, you know, being around him, because I feel as though I have that guilt of like, what if he knew that I loved him? Would this outcome still be the same? If he knew that his family loved him, if he knew that his children loved him, um, would he still feel so much pain? Would he still feel the need to use? So to answer your question, yes, I think the guilt heightens in certain situations. Life is short, and I think losing many people to addiction has taught me that although you don't want to enable that behavior, it is so important to tell the people in your life that you love them and to reassure them and give them that strength. It's exhausting being somebody who loves an addict, but when my uncle passed, I found that it was warming to my heart that I was able to share that love with him before he passed, and I didn't have that same experience with my father. So I think that it's just very important to show those people the amount of love you have for them and who they truly are in their heart, and when they're not getting high.
How would you say you dealt with your grief? Like through, because I know like it all four of the loved ones that passed away happened within like really close timelines. I would say, like, how did you deal with your grief through everything?
So a lot of my uncle passed, I believe, right like a year before COVID. And then as COVID came, that's when I started to see a rise in like death. I think that was kind of nationwide. A lot of people started to see deaths through addiction during COVID. And so it was very hard to grieve because I had no distraction. I had nothing to kind of do to keep my mind off of things. I really just had to sit with my thoughts because we were that time when we were quarantining. And I think that is where, I was sitting in bed the one night and I just found out that my dad passed away, and instantly I was just kind of in shock. But when I sat there, it was a hard thing to manage, especially that I wasn't speaking to him at the moment. Um, that's my father. That's half of me. That's somebody who I once had a really good relationship with. And I think throughout my grieving process, um, I really had to I really had to put into perspective, um, you know, people aren't perfect and people hurt, and this world is hard and this world is cold, and people have different ways to get through their pain. And so I, as an adult now, I don't shame people who are addicts, and I really hurt for them and it hurts my heart. But I think with that being said, I truly just wish that it was something that just didn't exist. I wish that we could get these hard drugs off the street. I know it's a fantasy and it's not something that's as easy as snapping your fingers, but um, these people who I lost are good people, and they are people who, as an adult, I think that if I had them in my life, I'd be living a different life. I think I would be experiencing things differently. I'm somebody who's very emotional and I hurt hard, and so, you know going through things even without them, it's kind of one of those things where it's like, I wish I had my dad here. I wish I had my uncle here. I wish I had not experienced these traumatic things throughout my life. And I think a lot of it resonates with how I emotionally handle things as an adult. Um, I think it's kind of played a huge part in my life. So it's difficult, but it's manageable at this point in my life.
Yeah, so going off of that, when we were talking to Tanya, she was saying how she feels as though now, like, she had a life before JJ and a life after JJ. Do you feel the same way?
Absolutely. Um, I think losing quite literally like every father figure I had from the time I was born until the time I was 21, um, it's hard. I mean, it's hard not having a constant in your life. For me, um, I've had a lot of, like I said, I had my brother's father who raised me until I was about 11. And I had my dad who I met when I was 12. And my uncle was a constant since the day I was born. Um, and, I felt like I always had someone. I always wanted to be a daddy's girl. I always wanted my dad's attention. I always wanted my uncle's attention. Um, I needed that reassurance, especially, going through high school and you're meeting boys, or, I bought a house and having things, done for me home. Like now as an adult, I don't have that protection. Like I don't feel as though I have that, like I can call my dad and he'll come fix it for me, and I can call my dad and he'll save the day. Or I'll call my uncle and same thing. I know it sounds so silly, but when I was growing up and you kind of like dream about your wedding, I was so excited because at this point I didn't have a really good relationship with my father. So I was like, my Uncle Eddie is going to walk me down the aisle and he's going to be the one, because he has been my constant and he has been, the dad figure in my life, and he's so important to me and I love him so much, and I wouldn't want anybody else to give me off to my husband aside from him. And, I don't get that anymore. I don't get to have um, my wedding with my dad or my uncle. I don't get to have my first child with, their grandpa. It's things like that where you think about those monumental moments as you grow up and you have these things that you can't wait for. I don't get to experience those with the people I love. And I think that is something very difficult for me. But there's also just the day to day. I printed out a text message from my uncle from when I was in college, and after he passed away, I screenshot and I printed it, and it's just him giving me motivational advice. He's like, "You got this. You can do it. I believe in you." And just simple words like that, where if I'm having a tough time and I needed somebody, he's the person I would go to, and I don't get that anymore. So
Yeah.
it's difficult in the sense that you don't have your person.
Yeah.
Like my uncle was my person. He was my guy. He was my go-to. He was a lot of people's go-to. He was just that kind of person. Everybody wanted to talk to him and everybody wanted to hear from him. And, he was the kind of guy you went to when you were struggling. And, you lack those things in life now. When you're
Yeah.
going through a hard time, you don't have that person anymore. So you
Yeah.
you feel alone. You feel lonely. You feel like you got to get through it yourself. It's tough.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you have any, like, I guess, regret that your uncle didn't come and confide in you when he wanted to go use drugs, or like when he started using again?
My uncle started, so my uncle was clean for 7 years.
Yes.
He was going through something that was quite difficult in his life.
Mhm.
And he was at my aunt's house the day before he passed, and I was there with him. And my aunt texted me and said, Uncle Eddie's here. He's in town because he was living down the shore. So he's in town. I was so excited. I went right over, gave him a big hug and a kiss, and let him know, like, I'm asking him, how are things going? And he seemed sad, but, never in a million years did I think it was that bad.
Yeah.
And he said to my aunt after I left, I thought nothing of it. I specifically remember I, I was like, I gotta go. And I gave him a big hug and I said, I love you. And he said, I love you, princess. And he had told my aunt that he was going to a meeting with his buddy. And I believe he told his buddy that he was staying at my aunt's or going home. So the next morning, my aunt usually was getting a FaceTime call from him. She didn't get the FaceTime call, so she started to get worried. And turns out he never went to the meeting and he never stayed at my aunt's. He went and got what he needed to get through his pain. And that was, from what I understand, the first time that he used in 7 years, and it killed him. So, yes, I don't want to say I regret because it's not my choice to make, but
Yeah.
it hurts that he didn't confide, and it hurts that he was hurting that bad and I couldn't tell. Like,
Yeah.
I wish in that instance that I could stay with him the whole night. Like, if had I known that I knew he was going through something hard, I knew he was hurting, but had I known it was that bad, like, I wish I could have hugged him tighter. I wish I could have stayed with him. I wish I could have talked him out of it. I'm grateful in the fact that I got to tell him I love him and I got to see him and spend time with him. But, it's one of those things where it's like, what if? What if
It's always
I
the what
told him
ifs.
something different? What if I talked to him more? What if I, what if I never brought it up? Because I did ask him that day. I'm like, how are things going? Like, what if I didn't make him think of it? Would things have been different? So it's something that, I dealt with those what ifs for a very long time. And I thought about those what ifs for a very long time. And that was a really hard thing to process.
I can only imagine because I mean, I was obviously in the family at that time, and at the time. I mean, I didn't really know Uncle Eddie. I mean, I was around for a couple of years, but I didn't know him like that well, and I'm kind of sad that I didn't get to know him that well because from what I have seen, he was a great person.
Amazing.
But like I still remember getting the phone call. I was working at the daycare at the time, and I remember your mom called me, and I'm like, that's weird. Like, why is Denise calling me? So the girl I was working with, I was like, I think I have to answer this, and like, and I mean, obviously, my pain was nowhere what you and Freddie went through, but like, I still remember the pain it hit me. I'm like, oh my god, because now the people I love are going to be hurting, which is going to affect me, and I think that's like another like crazy not crazy thing but like another interesting thing is like even though like my relation and even like when your dad passed like I didn't know your dad but I knew it was affecting the people like I loved so then therefore like it was affecting me and hurting me because I don't want to see the people I loved being hurt.
Yeah.
It's, well, Harley, it's exactly that. Exactly what you're saying is what it's like to love an addict.
Got it.
Because you know they are hurting.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You know that they are struggling.
Mhm.
And it hurts you to see them so hurt.
Yeah.
And I
That's
feel like
exactly what it's like.
I feel like that's like with my mom and dad. Like, if my dad never left, then my mom wouldn't have been hurting so bad to go and choose to do drugs. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like that's why she was hurting so bad. And like you love them to death, but you know they're hurting.
Yeah.
And like like addiction's a disease. Like, I say this day in and day out. It's a disease. Like, it sucks because it's a disease, and people are hurting, and they just want the pain to stop. They just
Right.
want to feel numb. They don't want to feel what they're going through anymore. And like I say to this day too, I'm like, what if I never like moved out so early? Like, would my mom have stopped? But like, then again, addiction's still a disease.
Yeah.
They will stop when they want to stop.
Mhm.
And like the thing is too, if they never stop hurting, they're never gonna stop either.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And
Until
people-
those demons in their head go away and they like go to the right resources, that's when they'll be able to like finally, stop, I feel like.
People who are addicts and are recovering from addiction, like after seeing my uncle, I learned that they are recovering forever. Like it is a struggle. Like some days are easier than others, I'm sure. But I think once you become an addict, and I'm not an addict, so I'm not going to speak on behalf of them, but just
Yeah.
from my experiences with the people that I love, I feel as though once you are in recovery, it is a daily choice and a daily struggle that you have to fight through.
Some days like they don't care. They want to go and pick up the needle or go take that pill, but like it's they wake up every day and they have to make the choice, like, I'm going to stay sober today or I'm not going to stay sober today. And it like sucks because like when addicts, I'm like you said, like, I'm not speaking on behalf of them because I'm not an addict, but like I feel like addicts, like, they wake up and they're like, is today like am I feeling okay today? Like, am I hurting really bad? Like, is today like like they have to make that choice that like I'm gonna stay sober. If not, like they're gonna fall off the path. Like, and that's what sucks with addiction. Like, it's so like the smallest thing could teeter them to go get high again. You know what I mean? And like you never know with them. It's like it sucks.
Yeah. But that's why I think that, the most important thing is to be kind and show love to everyone, but especially the people in your life who are struggling. And that you knowingly see struggle, because those are the people that need it the most.
Yeah.
And I also think it's important to realize that people struggle with several things, addiction included, that you don't even know about.
Yeah.
You
It
don't.
could be the president and he could have an addiction, but like you would never know that. Like, you never, like, some people who have addictions hide it very, very, very well.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
will say. I know a
So
lot of people who I found out were addicts and I was like taken back because I was like, you would never expect that from that person.
right.
But like,
But I think that's why the most important thing is just, when you are around these people that you love and that you cherish and your relationships with them are important, life is so short. And
yeah,
you really truly never know when it's going to be somebody's last breath. And
yeah,
like I said with my uncle, I was with him the day before. I thought I had eternity with that man. Same thing with my dad. Like, I wasn't speaking to him, but I would have never guessed that just one day he wouldn't be here anymore. And I think going through these passings in my life has just taught me how important it is to be present and to spend time with people that you love, and to not take any day for granted, and to just spread kindness and let the people that you love know you love them.
yeah. I
That
do
is so important.
I do have one question. With your dad, like when you knew he was actively being an addict before you stopped talking to him, did you have any hate towards him? Because, like, I will have to say, like, sometimes, like, I had a lot of hatred towards the loved ones in my life that were addicts because I'm like, why would you ever do this to our family? Why would you put us through this? Like, like just like the things that a teenage kid would think about, you know what I mean? But like I know when I was younger, like I had a lot of hatred for the addicts in my family.
Yeah,
Did you?
absolutely. Absolutely. I think as similarly to you, I was very present in my dad's life throughout high school. So I was a teenager, and I did have hatred towards him. I was angry at him because I felt like, why are you picking drugs over your kids?
Yeah.
Why are you destroying our family? I saw like it felt like I saw a demon. Like he was not the dad that I was just with. He was a different human being. And, there were times where as a teenager, like I worked at a fast food store like 2 miles down the road when I was 16. And there would be times where I'd call my dad. I don't have my license yet. It's 11 o'clock at night and I wasn't living in a safe town. And I'd call him like, hey, Dad, can you pick me up from work? And it was, no, I can't. I'm sleeping. Really, he was high. So now there's little 16-year-old me walking down the street of a very unsafe neighborhood at 11 o'clock at night because my dad's too high to pick me up. And it was moments like that where I was so angry because I'm 16 years old. I shouldn't be walking 2 miles at 11 o'clock at night in this unsafe neighborhood. Why are you choosing drugs over your kids? And I think, once I graduated high school and I went to college, I saw my dad and I got into an argument with my dad. And that was kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back for me. I was so angry at him.
About that saying. I was going to say that before you said it.
Yeah.
Sorry. Continue.
But I was so angry and I was like, you know what? I don't need this. And I had this kind of thought process at the time that was like, I love you, but you are hurting me.
Yeah.
And I'm mad at you and I'm angry at you and I'm so disgusted. These were like my thoughts at the time. I'm so disgusted that you would choose drugs because at the time you think it's that easy. You think it's as easy as, oh, he just wants he likes drugs more than me, so he picks drugs, but he could just stop. It's not that simple sometimes, So it was hard on me. On top of going through like your typical teenage things that you're going through, I felt like I moved in with my father and he turned into a different person. He was like a monster. But with that being said, I have a little sister who's now 19. And when I wasn't talking to my dad, she was. And there were moments where I would talk to her and be like, you shouldn't talk to him. Like he's not a good person. And she was like, well, he's my dad and I love him. And I was very like, I was trying to protect her at the moment. I felt like I was protecting my sister because I saw this person that wasn't kind. And I didn't want my sister to experience the same things. But after my dad passed, I think she finds comfort in knowing that she had an active relationship with my father and she was able to create memories with my dad and still loved him through his addiction, whereas I didn't. And so, that hatred that I had in my heart is no longer there. I think now it's a lot of guilt and resentment because like I was able to do with my uncle, like I was able to love him right before he passed, and I knew that he knew I loved him. My dad knew my sister loved him. I don't know if my dad knew that I loved him.
Yeah.
And that's something that weighs heavy on my heart.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's everything we heard from Haley. And thank you again, Haley, so much for coming on and sharing your story with us. I mean, it means a lot to us. And like we said, we're just trying to spread awareness, especially on this topic, because it is something that is a big thing and a reality in our world today.
And actively going on.
Yes.
Like, every day it happens. So we just want people to be more aware, and I know people don't like to talk about heavy topics like this.
Yeah. So we appreciate it so much that being as vulnerable as you were and like sharing your story.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for using your platform for something that is so important. And I really appreciate having the opportunity to share my story with everybody.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. We love you.
Ladies and gentlemen.